Hi, everybody. Hello. Thank you for coming to drop in on our panel. I want to introduce myself. My name is John Santos, and I am the creator of a project called Ontopo. And Ontopo means, it's a word that I made up. It means, I shortened the word topography and added the prefix on. So roughly it means on the land. And what I do is I bring artists to sacred sites around upstate New York and in Mexico and create a context for creating work, creating performances, creating site-specific work. And it's a 3 to 4 day long experience. And before I conclude talking about that, I just want to thank the New Art Dealers Alliance for giving us the space to present this work. I also want to thank one of the filmmakers who could not make it today. Her name is Tiare Ribeaux, who is on residency right now as a part of the Sundance Native Labs. All the way on the end here is Sebastian Galasso, Jody Stillwater, who's a collaborator with Tiare. Nanea Lum, who's an artist whose work I'm presenting at booth P12. And Sebastian Galasso, directly to my left. And it is a complex work. Nanea's work in the booth is generated in and around the site of Manoa. It is a watershed, or in Hawaiian it's an ahupoa, that is, I think, a major, for me, it's a deeper way to reflect on how we understand the natural environment. Basically, the flow of the water from the top of the mountain to the ocean. So I've been living between New York City and Hawaii since 2020, and since I encountered this work, I realized that I've learned that the Hawaiians have a word, the āina, which is basically way more in-depth describing what I started as a concept called Ontopo. Because of this reason, I decided that it was important to share this work with the community in New York City. And so with that, I want to just pass the mic to Sebastian and Nanea, and if you guys want to mention anything about the film and get started, yeah.
Thank you, John. Nanea Lum here with John at the Ontopo booth. I just wanted to agree with him on sacred sites and Manoa being one of them. And so the next film that you'll see has been made in collaboration with Jody Stillwater and Tiare Ribeaux. And we're really excited to give everyone here viewing a experience of the materials that connect us, including the water and the system of āina, which John started mentioning. So we're all going to have a kind of experience in Manoa and then be able to talk about what that means after. Okay, thanks so much.
aku ana au ia oi aia I hea ka vai a kane. Aia I ka hekina a ka la, puka I hae hae. Aia I laila ka vai a kane. E ui aku ana au ia oi aia I hea ka vai a kane. Aia I ke kua hiwi, I ke kua lono, I ke awava, I ke kahawai, aia I leila ka vai a kane. E ui aku ana au ia oi aia I hea ka vai a kane. Aia I kai, I ka moana, I ke kua lau, I ke ā nue nue, I ka pūnohu, I ka ua koko, I ka ā lava lava, aia I laila ka vai a kane. E ui aku ana au ia oi, aia I hea ka vai a kane. Aia I lala, I ka honua, I ka vai hū, I ka vai kau a kane me kanaloa. He vai puna, he vai inu, he vai mana, he vai e ola no, ea.
Mahalo everyone for watching. Thanks for visiting the āina of Manoa for a short time with me in this film Ulu Kupu. I wanted to go over what some of those materials were because I hope later some people will have questions, but before we break into the questions and answers, I want to talk about the material that I brought here to New York with me. This is from the film, and I'm holding a piece of ulu. And that ulu was gathered from the ulu tree. Its bark can be stripped. And so in this film, I'm demonstrating what that material process is. Gathering the ulu, slicing it down the middle, and then continuing to process this bark. So being able to share what the information is on this tree has been difficult because it's an ephemeral process. Once it's transformed from its growing stage into its fermentation and further processing into cloth, it is now a part of a Hawaiian material culture. And Hawaiian material cultures in the modernity can be seen in many ways. And here we're doing it through this film and also through my paintings that I brought. And so I have some of these forms of kapa making while it's in its stages of completion. So in these stills, you can see me stripping the bark from the outer bark and the inner bark so that I can gather what is the softest part of this tree and transform it into cloth, which becomes my substrate for printmaking. It's a quite beautiful process. It engages with the systems of āina. You need to wet and felt this material. So I'm using beaters that are handmade from different indigenous woods, like the milo tree. But this is the ulu and the milo implement together on top of a pohaku, which is a rock. And so never separating this natural process from the environment is really important to me, while I also take this material back into my studio and use contemporary forms of printmaking on top of it in order to tell these stories. And so the deep value of kapa making is that it teaches you to balance both time and elemental elements like water, vai. So the process of taking your time with this material will transform it into something very fine, very durable, and wearable. It can be significant to ceremonial activities, spirituality, and in my material processing, it engages with the system of āina so that we can take better care of those systems, keeping water clean for further generations. And so I'm displaying the process of beating kapa because this is my personal fascination with the process. The beater, the ie kuku, leaves marks inside of the fiber as I'm working it, and those marks lead me directly into painting. My paintings are about mark making, and also kapa is a process of leaving behind marks in a strategy for creating cloth. And so if we think about canvas and if we think about history of painting, my indigeneity is now leaving a mark behind in this contemporary history, and also allowing more broad audiences into Hawaiian contemporary art. I have a few paintings in my P12 booth with On Topo, and I think that after spending time with this film and spending time with this process, you'll be able to notice and remind yourself of what the compositions are and the different forms that kapa leaves behind, especially in memory. So I take what this memory gives to me as a stage of time, and I quickly reproduce that into paintings and gestural mark making so that the process can live on without remaining static. The kapa is normally wet while it's being worked, and so it's an embodied process. Like, your body exchanges a lot of energy once you enter bodies of water. Our composition as human is part water, and so reminding ourselves of how we exchange with our systems of āina is really what's going to balance a healthier lifestyle and a safer way of engaging with the forest and with an aquifer that is quite delicate. So at this time in the talk, I want to start engaging with how this process has mirrored a āina, a system of āina. So Kānaka, or Hawaiian people within the land, are a part of this system of āina itself. The bodies of our people are never disconnected from the land system with which we had settled and grew into. So working with my collaborators and with each person, like, bringing a very significant material into this process of collaboration, we mirror and parallel how an āina system works with each rain catchment or valley system, and then estuaries. If we kind of start thinking about where each of us engages with water, you'll also be able to relate that to the material processes, like gathering the lauhala, which Lise displays, and myself gathering the ulu, which I had displayed in this film. And so with Jody as a really great director, we've been able to access some very restricted zones using light equipment and many hands. We enter the stream, and we do that at an area called Waiakea. Wai is like the freshwater system of the akua, of the gods. And so we're engaging with aumakua, or familial gods of Manoa. And so all of that takes a kind of intention and purposefulness. And so I'm really glad to say that my collaborators have had such great intention with displaying this visual culture and being able to relay the information from the past into the present and leaving this behind for others to engage with in the future. And so again, just reiterating the kapa being a kind of plant material harvested from the earth, processed through water and time, and then in this film, engaged with collectively. And so I want to hand it over to Jody so we can talk about filmmaking. Thank you guys so much.
Nice. Check, check. Hello, hi. Thank you, Nanea. Yeah, it's to just kind of go with what Nanea was saying about the process. Approaching this film and approaching working with Nanea, it's a lot of it has been about looking at what rhythms and what cycles live in her practice and in nature and in the practice of filmmaking and the practice of ingesting imagery as an audience member, as a filmmaker, as a observer of art, as a participator in culture and society. Was one thing that we really tried to do. So I co-directed this film with my directing partner Tiare Ribeaux, and we Tiare is originally from Honolulu, also. So we became. Tiare was obviously very acquainted with Kānaka life and culture and connection to the āina. And for me, it was really kind of a newer thing. I mean, I'm very connected to my own indigeneity and my understanding of that. But to come to Hawaii and learn about what connection to the āina meant was really fulfilling and super important for me. And a lot of that was in working with Nanea on this piece. And something that we learned in approaching this film with respect and with permission is that the āina is a term for the land, but it's not. It's so much more than that. It's so much more like you're looking at this entity, and this entity holds root systems. It holds water systems, both below and above the island, within the island, within the people that are transmitting that information between them, and all the animals and everything and the elements, and all that space is its own entity. It's its own kind of neural network, like kind of bio neural network, and so what we tried to do was approach the documenting Nanea's process, which is something that she mentioned that was really interesting about your process, was that space of it being kind of like labor hula. So
And an in-betweenness, right? Like, so a process never finished, in between conceptual world and reality. And so, yeah, that hula being a very composed and collective dance. But we do this together as we work, especially in the land. So, yeah, labor hula, but not the hula of labor.
yeah, but what was fascinating to me about that was like there's this like cyclicality, and as you pass it down through generations, you watch these kind of patterns emerge, and you watch that kind of rhythmic labor happen between student and teacher, between parent and child. A lot of that like kind of almost like if you were to look at it from a bird's eye view, you're almost looking at these like notches, rhythmic notches. So it was interesting because what we would try to do generally with our films, Tiare and I, and then also just my own films, is to make the way that the information is transmitted in the film, whether it's through imagery, dreaming, dialogue, settings, locations, is to replicate the thesis of what we're trying to say. Let's say about the āina. So we wanted to, with this film, we would replicate how, this is a very slow film in a lot of ways. And so we wanted to transmit it slowly because so you spend time with the āina, so you spend time with that network, and so you could start to actually feel the way it replicates in the medium of the film itself. And so we often try to do that with our films, and in this case, with specifically engaging with Nanea and Hawaiian culture, also, it's this place where you really see colonialism and indigeneity collide in a very distinct way. Because when I live in San Francisco, and in San Francisco, you don't really see coloniality. You are just in it. It's invisible in a way because it's just swallowing your whole being, And so going to Hawaii was like a very kind of a revolutionary experience for me, because I was I saw all the things I wasn't seeing because you guys are so present with your past and with your future, and I come from a place where I'm part Cherokee, I'm part Chinese, I'm part Norwegian, and so but I'm only just a little bit Cherokee. And so to embrace that, I have to fight through all these ideas of legitimacy, right? And it's that part of the coloniality that specifically destroyed and disseminated and refracted indigeneity in the United States, that I have to actually fight to embrace that in myself. So going to visit you guys and learning that, I'm trying to bring that into my own practice. So what we're doing with our films, Tiare and I, and Sebastian and I, and my own films, is to really dig into the language of indigeneity, what that really means in a very deep way, in a lot of broken trajectories that were interrupted through coloniality, and to understand those symbols, bring them back, and then bring them into modernity in respect to all the struggles that everybody has gone through. Because as we've gone through all these struggles, we've had to adapt ourselves, we've had to change ourselves, we've broken ourselves, we've put ourselves back together. And if we just say, I'm gonna try to find what was lost, which is important too, if we don't also accept the struggles that we've made through this loss and these traumas and these destructive colonial processes, then we're also not really respecting what we've done and who we are. So we try to take those things together and really respect both places. So with Sebastian and I also have a creative group, a company called Lenape Creative Group. Oh yeah, and these are some imagery that are examples of. I don't know if this one shows up so well in the light here, but so these are some images of films that I have made, and Tiare and I have made, and Sebastian and I have made, that are kind of examples of digging into symbolism, reapproaching symbolism, and making it fun, cool, beautiful, impactful. So, oh, it's got a laser pointer. I'm gonna use that. Okay, so here, this is a film from this is a still from a film called Missing Persons. It's actually starring Sebastian. This is a still from Ulu Kupu. Oh shit, yeah. This is so Tiare and I. One of our big missions also been to bring STEM, bring queerness and BIPOC elements to STEM scenarios in science, to show representation, and against more traditional forms of what science is seen as. This is a still from our film Āina Visions. This is a film I made called Wind Telephone. This is also from Missing Persons. As you can see, there's like some kind of, this is a fruit. This is a rotten, like a melon, and that's a knife. If you want to see the film, it's called Missing Persons. It's online. This is a recent, still from a recent music video we made for Tyler Holmes in Oakland, California, and that's Tyler. This is also still from Āina Visions. And this is a still also from Missing Persons. This is the artist here is Dara Peterkin. And then we shot this in San Francisco. This is a behind the scenes shot of Āina Visions. So, Seb, do you want to?
Greetings, everyone. My name is Sebastian Galasso, and I will be moderating these two amazing artists in a discussion about some of what we just saw and some of what we have just heard. So to begin, I've been having these conversations with many of my friends about who owns culture? Let's start there. Who owns culture? And the reason I ask that question is because in many of my discussions about art, particularly cultural art, any kind of ethnic art, the artists, particularly the contemporary artists, have a dilemma where their art is not being seen as straight ahead art. It's being seen as this cultural art that belongs in a very special cultural space. So for instance, what is Hawaiian art? I would like to know.
Okay, now I get to shout out all my favorite Hawaiian contemporary art spaces. I came to New York to really discuss what you had just said. What is Hawaiian contemporary art? Does it belong in a really specific cultural space so that we're all safely engaging with it, we're not appropriating, and we're just taking our time learning and experiencing it? And so what is Hawaiian contemporary art for those reasons? For me, no one owns a cultural moment at all. We all engage with the past, the present, and the future simultaneously. And so my teachers of Kappa, my elders, Verna Takashima, taught me to be Kappa in Manoa, where I had absorbed that experience and then directly engaged with contemporary art making at the gallery that I'm most represented by, usually at Aupuni Space in Kaka'ako. So collectively, these collaborators, we had just closed a show at Aupuni Space in Kaka'ako. So this contemporary art space offers a white cube for cultural art makers, contemporary artists to do shows. We had a group show called Ulu Kupu, which displayed my kappa after it was printed. So to me, the experience of sharing that with my kumu kappa, Verna Takashima, as she taught me first to be kappa and now experiences my direct usage of that in the contemporary art world. What that reaction is of those makers to my work, I'm very, very conscious of that, because I know about the simultaneous nature of the past, the present, and the future, and is this appropriation, or are we doing this contextually in a safe cultural space? We're here at NADA, and we're sharing kappa, and so that is also really important to me, that a broad audience, along with my kumu kappa, can ask questions and learn from each other about material processes that will continue to teach our next generation about a balance between our gathering from the earth and our creation, the things that we leave behind. So that's my answer to your question.
That's a very good answer. Very nice. So with regard to sharing culture, how do you protect the culture through the work and through your stewardship of the work?
I said this to Jody last night when we were at dinner, but I'm just really glad for my collaborators of different media who I've never had to tell them about the connection to āina. You know, and it was interesting to work with a non-native to Hawaii, a non-native media artist, to work with them and to never need to over-explain the significance of something related to the earth, related to ourselves, in telling this story. And so I think protecting culture isn't necessarily my job, but it is something that I'm conscious of. I want to work with the right people. I want to share stories not disconnected from their environment. So we don't just bring kappa here, we bring the film here, we bring the paintings here. We bring everything that people are going to need in order to make these connections for themselves. And so, yeah, I want to give Jody a chance to answer too.
Yeah, actually, I have a question for Jody that relates to this. So I worked with Jody and Nanea on another project that was also filming in Hawaii, and
Pō'ele Wai, which we will show in a moment, the trailer.
And during that process, I found myself, I won't say grappling with, but just I found myself questioning how and where to kind of fit into this entire ecosystem of culture and creativity, you know, without removing or damaging any of the intent, you know, because sometimes when you enter into a space as an outsider, it can be very easy to not fully understand what you're doing and how you're doing it, and in the process that can damage or create chaos. And that's something I was very conscientious of, even right down to the way that we would enter the jungle. You know, there's a process there. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of dreaming that went on. And Jody, you had a similar experience, and I would like to hear you kind of open up that Pandora's box.
Yeah, for sure. I think that what was something that I was like became really relevant to me in that space was okay. So I'm a bunch of very mixed race, mixed cultures. Just that's my background, what I grew up in, around what I am like genetically too. So I end up in a lot of situations that are between cultures. So it's a really interesting space to like navigate, because you end up like coming up with different languages of how, you know, some of it's code switching and some of it's like, I almost don't even want to say code switching, because it's kind of like you try to carry the same intention between a culture. Let's say you're communicating with this group and then this group and then this group, but you want to maintain the integrity of your intention, but you want it to really land. So as a mixed person, I think that like I almost see that as a.
I think we should watch Pō'ele Wai before we go too deep into questions that are answered through Pō'ele Wai.
For sure. Let me just finish that real
Okay.
quick. And so I think that space is like, if to do that respectfully, I think it takes this degree of seeing and taking time with and respecting all the groups that you're with, and then carrying that and then delivering that like intention, or receiving that intention and incorporating it into this. So what was interesting about engaging with you all on this film in that space and respecting it as an outsider was as long as we connected to it in kind of a horizontal way where everyone was included and everyone was had a voice, it was almost like we were replicating nature. It was like we were replicating the root system of the āina, and that was something that I felt like was the only way to really be respectful of the land and the people and the culture, the history.
Can we watch the film?
Oh, so shall we introduce it real quick?
Yeah, we're going to introduce Pō'ele Wai, because this is what collaboration led to continuing to create films together and using the water as this driving force as to what that collaboration would mean. And so with that, we're going to watch Pō'ele Wai.
Oh, and real quick, sorry. So this is a trailer for a film that we're still fundraising for. We've shot about 7 days on it, and we intend to shoot another 7 days. So if you'll see that there's a lot of trajectory here, and that we are still going to shoot more.
Water vai and vai, those are these words for like richness or value. Vai, at the root of all of that, is the thing that makes everything alive. Kānaka have always had water systems that were public, but were not for sale. And here we are with polluted water, and we allowed fuel tanks to be placed directly over our aquifer.
All right, well, that was our trailer for Pō'ele Wai, which was an incredible experience that's still ongoing. And it was through that production, that process, that I met Nanea and really got a very thorough education on all things Vai, all things Hawaii. And I was humbled the entire time I was there. I found that for me, entering any space that I was led to required a certain level of surrender. And it was the most amazing experience to embrace that surrender. So with that being said, I would like to go back into this discussion about the process of entering nature, entering the jungle, entering the rainforest, some of where we shot, and being mindful, respectful of the land, the animals, the air, the water, while also coming in there with a task, while coming in there with an agenda, and keeping our intent very pure with regard to what we were actually doing. We're talking about raising money, we're making movies, we're bringing technology, we're bringing cameras and all sorts of things into this very sacred space. So I would like to talk a little bit more about that and kind of just get your feelings about the process of bringing people, bringing technology into those sacred spaces.
So I'm just gonna say one thing about Pō'ele Wai and about what you had said with the intention of technology in these sacred places in order to tell the story. So āina is the land, right? But if we think about the land and all of its connectivity to all things, interconnectivity, land is simply a basin for collecting water. So water falls from the sky and it lands on our planet. It's collected by systems. And in order for all of us to have these pure systems to validate our health and other education systems, we need to keep those as clean as possible. And so Pō'ele Wai is really a warning and part of an education for people who are simply disconnected from where water comes from, how to maintain it. And so while we're bringing technology into these sacred places like Ahupua'a, we're doing it so that a language of the modernity can form in between all of our belonging, all of our social responsibility. And so Pō'ele Wai is doing what it...
Also a language of modernity that's inclusive, where people that have historically been oppressed in these scenarios haven't had the opportunity to build what the language is, and here we are. We're trying to take the initiative, and not like we're doing it, but we're taking it from our own approach to create the modernity also as well. Sorry, go ahead.
So Pō'ele Wai is doing what it's got to do. Fundraising right now so that we can finalize this film and have it impact our communities of care. Communities of care, that's a really great segue so that we can start taking questions if anybody's got any about Pō'ele Wai, Ulu Kupu, or Hawaiian contemporary art.
Come on.
Or anything.
I think I see a question in the corner.
Since that was a question about Hawaii, I'll answer. Yeah, so he asked about Hawaiian contemporary art adding a level of complexity to other migratory stories or America's mesh of community. This is my first time to New York, and so I'm really excited to be bringing like what Hawaii has to offer as far as contemporary art and its critical lens. Being able to critique the military's presence in Hawaii, being able to critique a colonial past that continues to shape the way that we have to get by in Hawaii. This project and working with these media artists is engaging with our connectedness and how we need to work together towards future solutions. Climate change is just the tip of my iceberg as far as how we can connect to taking care of the planet together. But it's through culture and cultural visual experiences. We can all feel what the water is like through this project. And so that humanness is going to continue to connect us and our responsibility to water.
Yeah, many cultures hold water sacred, but a lot of people don't know what that means. You know, what does it mean to hold water sacred, and what does that look like? I mean, you know what water looks like on a pragmatic level. It's like, you know, okay, well, you know, we have to have enough water to make sure everybody can take a shower and water your crops and make sure everyone is hydrated and all that stuff. But then there's also the elements of water that as Nanea has been speaking to today, is that hold intention and hold care and hold entity and life. It's like, and so what we're trying to do with a lot of these projects is to say like, well, what does that look like? What does it look like to hold water sacred? What does it look like to all the spectrum in between water being a very pragmatic thing and water being a very sacred thing? And if you have a spiritual connection to it, how can I like embody something? How can I see something represented and then bring that to my life, because now that I understand it better, and then apply that to the rest of how I go out into the world. So we're not trying to tell anybody like what to do exactly, but we are trying to show how one can connect to water. And when you connect to water, that also changes the choices that you make in your life. It changes the things that you respect, and it changes all of the ways that you might affect policy, how you might be more active. We're not telling you to be more active. We're giving you, like, the idea is that to give the audience the knowledge and the care so that they can apply their engine of their being in the best way that they can.
This is a water activist film.
No doubt. I feel like I see a few more questions. I just don't see hands. There we go.
I recognize you.
Jody. Hi, I'm Trisha Lagasso Goldberg. I am from Hawaii, and I'm a curator. I practice between San Francisco and Hawaii. I'm curious, who is your audience? Like when you're making together as a collective, especially because you've got these different voices and perspectives coming together, who are you making for? So are you like thinking about other Kānaka when you're making? Are you thinking about your kumu when you're making? Are you thinking about white audiences at all? Like how does that figure into like your approach and collectively, individually? That's my question.
I got that question at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, a lot. And it's really important to me, audience, but I also think that Jody said something really important about looking at it horizontally so that we can be inclusive. And that's a great intention, especially for your practice in film. And for me, in contemporary art, my audience, am I making for Kānaka? Am I making for a broad audience globally? Or is it for an American audience to learn how to have more responsibility for their implications in Hawaii? Using my voice as it is presently to speak from the past, present, and future, everything in simultaneous nature, right? So the audience is all of that at once. The Kānaka of Hawaii, when they see their faces represented in these projects, it's important to them. When we have American audience looking and handling kapa for the first time, it's important to them too, to start to feel included into the nature of contemporary art coming from Hawaii and how they can understand that. So yeah.
I guess I think of who like you're talking about who specifically is the audience of the film? Is that the question?
I'm thinking about it, you as a maker. I mean, also you're an indigenous filmmaker, so you're, can you hear me? As an indigenous filmmaker who's not Kānaka Maoli, but you bring a certain perspective in your making, I'm wondering, like, who are you making for? You know, like when you're making something, I feel as simultaneous as a settler in Hawaii. Like my family's from the Philippines, but I was born and raised there. But I feel protective of the culture of Kānaka Maoli culture, material culture that's being made. Because I think there's a kind of vulnerability when you share it with an audience that doesn't understand, because Hawaii's relationship to colonialism and as a military base, an active military base, and there are so many ongoing injustices that you see enacted on the land. So I'm thinking about, like, when you're making a film, who are you really hoping to reach? You know, this is an activist film about Wai. You know, it is about ownership of land, of culture. I think in some ways, I mean, ownership is a charged term, but that's what I'm thinking about. And I'm looking also at the filmmakers, because you're not Hawaiian. So as you do this work, I feel like, yeah, you're entering the jungle and you do protocol because you have these guides who are with you, but like, who are you feeling, like, who are you envisioning the audience is?
Yeah, thank you for that question. To kind of go further into that, well, to be clear, also, I don't think this is any kind of excuse or shying away from that, but also to be clear, my co-director is Hawaiian, just so you know. And it's not necessarily something I would approach if it was just me, but for me, my particular approach to audience is that of understanding indigeneity in any concern, and because coloniality as a approach to engaging with societies obviously has been super destructive, and it has pervaded the planet, and whether we see it as the commodification of things that we really care about, and the loss of soul connection to those things, that has become a very important thing, I think, to re-engage with. And I think a lot of what it means to be indigenous is something that we really have to look at right now for all of us, indigeneity all over the world. And First Nations, on Turtle Island, Kānaka Maoli, all over the world. Whether you're like, a Lebanese or Russian or any kind of indigeneity connection to the land. What does it mean to not be a colonial culture? And I'm not going to say that any of those things don't have colonial culture elements around them too, because they do. But what does it mean to be a culture that does not go into other countries or other places, replicate without understanding the culture, destroy, and create, like, machine elements, mechanical elements of, like, say, the ideas of the nuclear family, to that then pave over.
I want to help summarize because I think we're out of time, but
Yeah, I'm almost done with that point. Real
Okay.
quick, sorry. So that place, if we can redefine indigeneity and really reconnect to it, when that means all over the world, Kānaka, Hawaiian culture is a really amazing example of where people really fight to stay indigenous, and they fight to maintain their culture and their future.
Well, that concludes our time together. It was awesome. You're all beautiful. And a big round of applause for Nanea Lum and Jody Stillwater.
Sebastian Galasso, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and listening to us talk about this. We appreciate it. And if you want to talk with us more, we'll be around. Also, we have more films, and we're fundraising for Pō'ele Wai. And I have some flyers that have a QR code if you want to check out the trailer and watch it at home.